Abby Choi was born on July 11th, 1994. She was the oldest daughter. She has 2 younger sisters. She grew up affluent. Her stepdad or father, whichever way you want to see it, because apparently she's the product of her mother's first marriage. The guy who raised her mother's current husband, the father of her 2 younger sisters, fully accepted Abby as his own. So the 3 girls were raised as princesses, living a life of luxury, but this did not spoil Abby. Her good heart would lead her to this terrible end. Let's get into this. Abby met Alex at school, and they were school sweethearts. Alex was the son of the disgraced police officer, obviously not from the same social economic class as Abby, but she wasn't judging that. She became close to the whole family, accepted his parents as her parents, and they married at 18 and had their first child shortly after. After having 2 children, born a couple of years apart, the oldest is now 10 and the other is 8, Abby and Alex called it quits. In 2016, the divorce with Alex was finalized, and she began a whirlwind relationship with Chris Tam, who would become her second husband. He was also super wealthy, even more so than Abby's family, and he's a real sweet guy. He actually had been a friend of Alex's back at school. Chris, he was nicknamed Prince Chris, and so this prince swept our little princess off her feet, and the 2 of them had a lavish wedding ceremony. Everyone was overjoyed. These 2 wonderful people had met and made this connection because they knew how bad her relationship with Alex had gotten, the marriage relationship. They remained friends and they remained close after the divorce because he's the father of the children, and Abby kept everything peaceful, and she was footing the bills for the family. She accepted all of them, continued to accept them as her family, as did Chris. Chris fully acknowledged, these are the other relatives of Abby's children. Abby's children are my children because I love her kids. And, he and Abby had 2 children of their own. Their kids are 6 and 3 years old now, making the kids 10, 8, 6, and 3 this year. And, they were just one big happy family. The older 2 would spend time with their father, spend time with Abby and Chris. The whole group would go on vacations together when Abby would go to different countries for her modeling career and, the fashion industry, which, like I said, her star was on the rise. And meanwhile, it seems that behind her back, the Kwong family were getting resentful of her because of her rising star and their spiral into kwong financially. Anyway, in 2019, Kwong decided to apply for government housing in May, and he was on the list and he was accepted for a government-funded home that is for lower income people. It's a government program there, and there are limits to what kind of possessions you can have, and savings, etc. And he qualified to this application. Meanwhile, he also had approached Abby. Abby trusted him as a parent figure, and he talked to her about investments, real estate investments and things like that, and Abby agreed to purchase in Kadori Hill this luxury apartment for the Kwong family to stay in. They were going to act as like caretakers of the property, and Abby was going to foot the bills, and she already had been footing the bills for them all along, but now she was going to be footing the bills on Kadori Hill, which was at this apartment, which is near her home with Chris in Kadori as well. So Abby began the process of purchasing this property in July of 2019 and made the final payment in October of 2019. And she put the apartment into Kwong's name because it would save her a load on taxes. You wouldn't even believe how much it would save in taxes because she already owned property. This would be like a luxury, and so the taxes were going to be astounding. Anyhow, so very trusting, she allowed it to be put into Kwong's name, and the family started living there in late November, December. And so that's how things were for a couple of years. But then in 2022, toward the end of 2022, Abby decided that she needed to pay more attention to her finances, and she needed to maybe expand her real estate portfolio. And so she approached Kwong, letting him know that she intended to sell the apartment and that she would put them up in an apartment in a not quite so expensive area, that she would purchase one for them elsewhere. And Kwong didn't like this at all. And he even threatened her and told her that she was a dead woman if she went through with this sale. And she reported this to her friends, but she didn't really take him seriously and went about with her plans to relocate them to a different apartment. Meanwhile, Kwong wasn't having it, and he thought to himself, hey, Abby and Chris's marriage is not registered, and if something were to happen to Abby, all of her estate is going to be divided between her children because she is divorced. Who would benefit would be the 4 children. The estate will be split between the 4 kids, and guess what? 2 of the kids are my son Alex's kids, and they live here with us. So, we'll be able to control whatever they inherit until they're adults. So this sounded like a good deal to him, and he decided that Abby had to die. And for some reason, the whole rest of the family went along with him in this scheme. They all agreed. Even Jenny, who, while she's not charged with murder in this, she is charged with obstructing justice. They were plotting against Abby. And then on February 21st, 2023, they put their plan into action. Kwong had previously purchased a cheap apartment in a seaside town in the suburbs with his mistress on the lease. And he had also already purchased a luxury apartment, but not in the same range as the Kadori apartment. But this upscale apartment was where he had his mistress living. Anyhow, he had rented this seaside apartment, and he purchased a bunch of equipment that you would find in a butcher's shop, bone saws, etc., and also purchased range. So February 21st rolls around. It's a Tuesday, and Abby, like clockwork, contacted Anthony to pick her up, to take her to her daughter's school, to pick up her daughter. She never made it to the school. The school tried to reach Abby. They couldn't get a hold of her. She wasn't answering her phone. Her social media had gone radio silent. This was not like her at all. This had happened never. And they called Chris, her husband, who also was quite alarmed because this is not like Abby at all. And Chris tried reaching her. And then he called her parents because in his mind, and in the mind of her parents, this must have been a kidnapping for ransom. And so they were going to wait for a ransom that night. And no ransom was forthcoming. So the next day they went to the police and they informed the police they didn't know what happened to Abby. The police, because of her high station in life, assigned 150 officers who quickly contacted the Kwong family, and all Kwong family members, their stories didn't match each other's. It immediately made the police suspicious, so they got a warrant to check the GPS of Anthony's car, a 7-seater Abby provided for him to be her driver. The GPS told a story. The GPS said that he had gone to Abby's apartment, which was verified by the CCTV footage at the lobby of Abby's place, which showed her leave the building dressed all in white, carrying a purple Hermes bag, and, getting into a 7-seater vehicle. So they knew that Anthony had picked Abby up, and GPS showed that they had headed towards King's Tunnel, which was on the way to Abby's daughter's school, but it stopped in front of the tunnel. And then it continued on, and then it went out of town, and it went to that seaside village. So the police went to the seaside village, spoke with the neighbors, and the neighbors told them that they were suspicious of Kwong. They had seen Anthony and Alex both around there. So police thought that perhaps the Kwongs had kidnapped Abby and just hadn't gotten around to asking for a ransom yet. And so they kicked in the door, expecting to find Abby in the apartment. What they found instead was her purple Hermes bag sitting all by its lonesome. And this apartment was cloaked in plastic tarping. There were black raincoats. There were splatter guard face masks. It just was a scene out of a horror movie. And as they looked around the apartment, they discovered a couple large soup pots that had stews in them, a little bit congealed on the top, and they could see the turnips and the onions and carrots and such in the soups, and that it had ground meat. There were meat grinders in the apartment. There was a lone refrigerator. They opened up the fridge, and there was a pair of women's legs in there. They immediately realized this was a terrible crime scene. When they had checked the purple bag, they found Abby's identification in there. They were pretty sure this was Abby. And so the search for Abby's remains began. They were checking the storm drains, etc. They were tracing the steps of the family. They got verification from the lab that this was Abby's remains. They discovered that Abby's skull was in one of those soup pots with some hair attached, but there was no flesh left on the skull. The skull had a large puncture wound on the back of it, which to them indicated that she had been hit in the back of the head with a hammer. They went and arrested Cow and Jenny and Anthony, but there was no sign of Alex. And so they put out a APB for him. Abby's friends posted a $2 million reward for capturing Alex, and somebody talked. The police got tipped off that Alex would be at a pier, and they went there at the appointed time and took him into custody. They also ended up arresting Cow's mistress, who it turned out had been harboring Alex in her apartment until he left to go to the pier. And they arrested that yacht rental guy who was renting the boat to Alex. And they arrested Alex's 29-year-old female friend who had been trying to make the arrangements for Alex so Alex could flee. Alex, when he was caught, had millions of dollars in cash and in gold and gold jewelry, watches, etc. He had enough money that he could have been on the run for a very long time. If convicted, the men are facing life in prison, and I'm not sure what exactly Jenny is facing. Meanwhile, there's going to be a drawn-out process regarding the apartment, and also it's going to be years before the kids are going to be able to inherit, because of, first, the murder trial has to happen, and then they have to have court regarding Abby's assets and distributing them. Meanwhile, Chris has adopted Abby's 2 oldest kids, and Abby's mom is helping him raise the kids. This whole thing is all based on greed and ingratitude. These people, they had it made. Abby was going to take care of them for the rest of their lives, just not in the luxury that they felt they deserved. She was the one working for it, and they were just screwing up. And they weren't even going to accept anything other than to do away with Abby and try to continue living this life of luxury. And it's just horrible. The evidence that the police presented in May shows that Abby's DNA and blood, etc., was in the back seat of that 7-seater car, and they have surmised that when the car stopped at the King's Tunnel, Alex got in beside Abby, and Alex is the one that hit her with the hammer, and then she was driven to the apartment where Kwong was waiting, and the 3 men went about her dismemberment. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next video. Love you guys.